So my study is based on the application of CLIL in Ecuador. So I'm taking two samples, a public school and the school I work in, which is a private school. So I'm going to ask you some questions based on the methodologies that we use here in Montebello. So when we talk about what are we teaching considering English in Prep A and Prep and Middle D, what are we teaching considering English as a general?
Okay. We're teaching the beginnings of literary analysis, beyond just reading for content. We're reading for form and structure, for different kinds of rhetorical devices that are used within literature and how to determine what it means. We're working on vocabulary generally through the novels that we read, increasing their vocabulary, understanding how the words are used in the context itself, as well as how they can be used in other contexts, because there are so many English words that are multiple meaning. And so we want them to be able to have those as tools to be able to use in other, not just to understand what they're reading, but to be able to use themselves in their own writing. We're also working with a lot of writing, introducing to them the ideas of argumentative writing, which is basically persuasive, but using support to defend whatever their argument is, whatever their position is. Informative writing through research and such, as well as narrative writing.
Would you define them as grammar classes or not?
We do grammar in the context of reading and writing, specifically writing. We do cover a little bit of grammar, but mostly it's done in the actual context of the writing, not as a separate thing, unless we see that there's a problem area, and then we might give a class or two focusing on that specifically.
So you might make a pause to explain that and then go back.
And then we'll go back to what we're doing.
So you do this, can we say that it's through the content of literature or not?
Yes, generally literature is kind of the tool, because we're teaching the standards, the Common Core standards, and literature is the tool that we're using to teach these standards. But we're also doing beyond just the literature, we're also using informational texts, informative texts that are nonfiction, that are related maybe to the era in which the book is written, some kind of subject that's covered in the book, introduced in the book. And we'll read some informational text to kind of give them context for it, and we'll do analysis of that as well, looking, for instance, to see if there's bias in the text, what the author of the informational text is trying to get across, what their message is, what the way they do it, the way it's constructed, how is it put together, and how does that help to achieve or take away from what they're trying to accomplish
through the language of English.
Through the language of English. All of it is English, yes.
Okay, if we talk about a sequence between Middle C, Middle D, Prep A, what sequence are they following as in this process of learning English from Middle C, Middle D, Prep A? Is there a sequence in there?
There's a sequence where we're doing the same things basically, because if you're familiar with the Common Core standards, they're the same. The anchor standards are the same, but they go deeper at each grade level. So where for instance, in Middle C, if you're looking at a piece of literature and you're looking at the characters, you're going to be looking at some basically superficial kinds of elements. You'll go into Middle D, you're going to be looking more at the characters' interactions with one another and how much is the character going to be changed through those interactions with other characters. And then by the time they get into Prep A, they're actually writing character analysis. They're determining, is that character a static or a dynamic character? Are those characteristics intrinsic or extrinsic? So we're doing some of the same thing, just going a little bit deeper into the skills.
So it would be
through
the depth,
grades.
right? It would go deeper.
The depth.
Yes.
It goes deeper. It's a scaffolded approach.
If how would you define the methodology that is used in this school? How do you teach English? If they ask you, in this school, how is English taught? You would, talking about a methodology, you would answer?
I would answer that we're doing it in such a way that they're introduced to it much more naturally, in the same way, really, as they are in their native environment. So when we start with the younger children, we're starting the way young children learn, through vocabulary. They're learning the words, they're learning the names of things. They're developing a vocabulary base. Just as they do in Spanish, they have that vocabulary before they start to read. So that when they're reading, those are concepts, those are things they already know. They're just now being able to put the words, read the words that are attached to those. So we do a lot of the same in English, and in the younger grades, we're focusing mostly on vocabulary, so that when they get up into third grade, which is our elementary C, then they learn the phonetic differences that there are between English and Spanish, but they already have the concepts, the ideas, the words. Then they can attach the letters and actual reading too. And then from there, we're doing it in the same way that we would in an English-speaking classroom anywhere else. We're teaching them, we're teaching language arts. We're not teaching English as a second language. Mm-hmm. Our goal is to bring our students to the point where they're fluent in English as well as in Spanish, and they're able to manage it well. So our methodology is the same as it would be primarily in an English-speaking classroom in an English-speaking country. We use a lot of the same techniques that we use that are used there. There's our own specific methodology as a school. There's components that come in that are related to that. But in terms of just teaching English, we're teaching it as though it is their first language. They're just starting it a little later than they do with their native tongue, because we spend that time before they come to school as preschoolers. They have a wide, broad range of vocabulary already before they get there in Spanish. So we're trying to duplicate that during the first few years of school in English, so that then they can go on to reading and writing and all of the things that,
so you can
that are
say
done
that
in a regular class.
In the early years, you make like a base of grammatic structures. So
grammatic structure, how to say things, how we say things in English, what the things are called, the names of things, and the grammatic structure. That a lot of that starts even with when they're in elementary C, with writing sentences and recognizing that the word order in English is different than it is in Spanish.
So that would be
structure.
A base for grammatic structure.
Yeah, but it's done in a natural context.
Okay. Considering the resources, what resources are used to teach English in this school? How would you define the resources?
We use a lot of novels. There are a lot of unit studies that we download that are available through the internet that we download to use. We have kind of an amalgamy of different things. We don't have a specific curriculum that we're following. A lot of it will depend on the teacher. I, as the coordinator, do find a lot of the study guides and such that we use that incorporate the standards, because that's what our focus is. But our resources, there's not a lot available here. So, but fortunately with the internet, everything's available. So I would say our greatest resource is the internet. And as coordinators and teachers, we have to check and make sure that the content and where it's going and all this fits with who we are as a school. But in the past, we brought a lot of resources from the States. But that's not possible now. But with the internet being all that it is and everything that's available, that's our resource.
And if we talk about the internet, we have to talk about the screens, right? Because that's basically, thanks to the screen.
Yes.
That would be a very important
an important resource. In order
to apply what is being taught
what
through
they're
internet,
what they're
right?
able to see. Yes.
Excellent. Yeah. Okay, so if we talk about purposes, if I would ask you, what is the in your methodology of teaching English, the process you follow for kids to learn English, what is the purpose? What is your objective that you have in the English department in the school?
Department is that by the time the students graduate, our goal is that they are fluent, not just in speech, but in writing and in comprehension in English. I often tell my students that I would love them to be able to go to a hotel like the Marriott, where I will read a book. I will look at one of their books that they put there for tourists, for visitors, and they have part of it written in English, or part of it in Spanish, and then it's translated in English, and I want to take my red pen to it because there's so many errors in it. And I always tell my students I want them to be able to take the red pen and find those errors. I want them to be so in control of that language and have it be so much a part of who they are that they're able to take that out and use it and open up the world for them, not just as somebody that's going to translate as a tour guide or something, but somebody who's going to be able to be a professional using the language
in other words,
in a
can we say
respected way.
handling the four abilities: reading, writing, speaking, and listening?
Yes, handling them, not just handling them competently, but mastering those.
Okay. Can you just give me 1 minute so I can get the charger of myself?
And he might need to come in here, so.
Is there another place that we can go because we're coming back from
That's what I
recess?
figured they were probably. I don't know, we can look and see if there's any other classes that are in.
The wall for
Looks like everybody's, all the classes are full. Maybe, let's see if Monica's on. She comes in.
Okay, thanks. All right, let's continue. So, all right. Those were the objectives. How do you evaluate in the end the level of, how do you evaluate that they're continuing in a good level, that they're advancing in the objectives you want them to advance? How do you evaluate that?
I think it's a day by day, week by week. We have a lot of, for instance, with writing, they do a lot of writing, and we're able to look at the errors they're making, that they're making them less consistently, that they're doing better with that. With their reading, judging by the kinds of questions that we ask for comprehension that are deep level beyond just content questions, that they're able to look beyond simply what it says.
Okay.
I think there's a lot of ongoing. We do a lot of what we call here visible learning. something that both the students and the teacher is able to see as a group and as individuals, what the students are understanding, what they're seeing, what they're not getting, and then there's continual reinforcement. So to ask if there's a way to know that, it's continual, it's building, we're scaffolding, we're continually looking at what they're getting and what they're actually grasping and finding out where those gaps are and then going back to plug them up. So to ask if there's a specific way through reading and writing
the abilities
and speaking, their abilities, what we're able to see about
and
how they're advancing.
according to the government in their plan of English, they say that every student that graduates high school in Ecuador should be able to obtain a B1 in the common exam of English made by Cambridge. That's how they would measure it. That's how they would evaluate it. In your point of view, the students here, that would be an easy task for them?
That would be so easy for them. They would be far beyond. There have been a number of students that have graduated that have gone on and taken tests like at La Católica, and they laugh at the test because they're so easy for them. Because they're far beyond second language English speakers.
Okay. What is your posture concerning the international baccalaureate?
I really don't feel like it's, at one time it was an advantage, but what's happening with the IB schools, that they are now adopting the Common Core. Most schools in the States, at least 48 of the states, the schools in the States are using the Common Core, and that includes IB schools. So they may call it and label it different, something different, but it is going to be the Common Core. And so there would be no advantage to an IB school over our school or any school that was using the Common Core. We're all teaching the same thing. We're all teaching to the same standards. So an IB school is becoming just a label because they're not going to have any real advantages over other schools.
And as you know, the IB schools, it's a 3-step program from primary, middle school, and the final diploma in high school. The government spent money for public schools for them to have the IB, but they bought the diploma program, that is the high school program. Your opinion on that?
I don't think that would be very effective, because if something is constructivist, if it's building towards something, if they're just doing it in the high school, they're entering it with so many gaps that are going to be impossible to fill at that level. It has to be something that's built towards. Just like with for instance, using the Common Core standards, which we've just adopted this year, it's going to be much easier for our students that are in elementary C, elementary D, middle A, middle B, when they get up into high school, to adapt to these standards, to understand them, to be able to go deep, to be able to master them. Much easier for them when they get to that level than for our students that are currently in high school who haven't had the process going into building it so that now they are able to grasp it more quickly. I think pulling it just in at high school level, the students enter it with gaps that can't be filled in such a short period of time.
So in your opinion, it's a waste of money because it's not for free, obviously.
No, and I think it'll be ineffective. I think it's probably just doing something because it sounds good and it's a label. Makes us feel like makes the country feel like it's advancing, but it really won't be at that point. It needs to start from the younger kids.
Okay. Your point of view on CLIL, this would be content and learning, integrated learning. This is a new methodology that scientists in the education field mention as the new methodology for English. This would be teaching English through subjects. That would be the few, obviously with the basis, grammatical base,
right,
since the primary schools, right? But they mentioned that in secondary school, only English through subjects. Your opinion on that new methodology?
I think that's, I think that's a good addition, but unless the teachers in the other subjects are trained in teaching English and recognizing the importance of writing correctly, and unless you have very proficient English teachers, English speakers that are first level language level, in those I feel like the students are going to come away with a limited English. I think having subjects in English in addition to having classes in English, but language arts, not English as a second language. Having the addition of that, I think that's great. I think that's wonderful, because that takes it out into really practical areas. But I think doing that without the one without the other, I don't feel like that works.
David March, who is the basically not the founder but the main defender of this new methodology, he says that it's not grammatical competence is not as important as communicative competence. If you obtain communicative competence, it's enough to understand other subjects. And he pictures, as another author, Gradle, says that English is going to become the lengua franca, the international language, the worldwide language. So it doesn't matter, the accent doesn't matter, the grammatical structures don't matter. In the end, communicative competence is what matters. So that's why they claim that. How do you obtain this? Teaching English through subjects. Basically applying what they learn in primary and part of middle school, applying it in the rest of middle school, all through high school. That is subjects in English. Your point of view on that?
I don't agree, because I know that first language speakers and first language organizations and companies, if someone's going to be employed by those in any capacity other than where they're going to be using verbal skills, they're not going to be able to do it. They won't be respected on the same level. If they're going to stay in their own country and work in a translation kind of thing, then that's fine. But if they want to go beyond that to a more professional level, then grammatic structure is important. When I hear someone, I have teachers here that I've interviewed that have their título, their degree in English here in the country, and who have taught subjects in English that I would not hire because their English is so poor. I believe that it depends on the capacity that those second language speakers are going to be operating. If they're going to be operating to their fullest potential, I believe that grammar, I don't think accent is important, as important, but pronunciation still is. Respect. I think there's a respect factor that comes with truly being able to manage the language proficiently, not just adequately.
And that influences on the students also. If they see a teacher like this.
Right. And they're not going to have respect. Our students here, when we have had teachers whose English hasn't been the best, they hear it, they recognize it. They come to us and say, this teacher doesn't know English. And so we've had teachers who have written things up on the board that are giving demonstration classes, and they've put things up on the screen or up on the board that are incorrect. Our students see that and they recognize it, and they wouldn't respect a teacher like that. So I disagree.
Okay, but however, you do agree on the fact that if you apply CLIL, content and language, if you decide to apply, you must also apply language arts in this case.
I believe that both are necessary to have the optimum results.
Yes, but you do see a positive effect on having subjects in
English. Oh, absolutely, because that's the real world. That's where it's going to be applied. Much more, you're not going to live in an English class. You're going to live in businesses. You're going to be discussing things that happen in the world. That's real life application. But I think trying to do the one without the other, I don't think is.
And these authors also mention the technique of, if in a science class, for example, they find a grammatical mistake by a student, they make like you said before, a parenthesis, explain that grammatical mistake he made, and then go back to the context that is science.
Yeah, and I think that that's fine. But if for instance, in a social studies class,